Buffalo podcast. This is your host Ravikant, aka the Buffalo Intellectual. Welcome to another episode. Some strange stuff is happening in this country, and it's scary that nobody seems to be very worried about it. I'm talking about the delimitation debate, which is currently going on. At the time of recording, I think like four chief ministers, deputy chief ministers, or maybe more representatives from many different political parties, mostly in South India and East India, but even I think Punjab representative was there, Bhagwant Mann, the CM there. They got together in this conference called by the Tamil Nadu chief minister on the delimitation debate, and they have issued a proclamation. Basically, many states have come together, not just the chief ministers, but even in Telangana, for instance, Revanth Reddy, who's the chief minister of Telangana, went for this, but also the BRS, which is like the opposition party. They also went for this. It's not just a few parties here and there. It's not just an opposition thing. Everyone's going for this. I would imagine Andhra, Chandrababu Naidu and Pawan Kalyan, their parties are not represented, but that's because they're in alliance with the center. But I cannot imagine just them being okay with the delimitation exercise either. They just don't want to make a political scandal out of it. They don't want to kind of show up and be photographed and stand next to politicians from the DMK or CPM, which is in power in Kerala. So Pinarayi Vijayan, Stalin, Revanth Reddy. I can understand that Chandrababu Naidu would not want to be there, or Pawan Kalyan, but privately, I can't imagine these political parties also agreeing to this kind of exercise which is going on. And it should be very, very scary, because it's getting wrapped up with this whole debate on federalism. It is getting very wrapped up with this idea of language, North versus South. And I don't think it is immediately a danger to the idea of India. And I think it'll be many years before it eventually manifests. But this is a ticking time bomb. And the way it is being handled, I think we are very close to the point of no return. And that is a very, very scary thing. By that, I mean, what is this point of no return? And I thought this episode I'll talk a little bit about nationalism and why nations fracture. It's something that I've looked into a lot, especially in the context of Asia, in the context of Africa, a lot of Latin American conflicts and situations like that. What is this nationalism business? And I've talked about this previously in some things here and there, but it's something that I teach in classes also. So at the very outset, I think it's important for people to understand that nationalism is actually very new. Nation states are very new. India as a geographic entity, Africa is a geographic entity. There is no country called Africa. It's a continent. It's a region. Europe बोल के कोई country नहीं है, but it's a region. So these regional identities existed. There was something called a European culture or a Western European culture, or by extension, if you want to say Indian culture. There is this broad understanding. Jada closely, if you look at it, of course that also fractures, because there are many different kind of Indian cultures or many different kind of European cultures. But broadly, for most of history, you could say, okay, Indian culture is different from Roman culture, is different from Chinese culture. You could aggregate it. But these were not nations in the modern sense of the term. So India is an old region, is an old identity. India, Hindustan, whatever word you want to use for it, Bharat, whatever. But the nation of India is actually very recent. The nation of India comes into existence in 1947. That's because nationalism itself as a concept, this idea that one people, one language, one ethnicity, one religion, whatever, like, you find the homogeneous common and you build a political system around it, is actually and like, that political system is based on right of self-determination, is actually a very recent occurrence in human history. We've had recorded human civilization and writing and bureaucracy and systems and governance for almost 5,000 years, and the nations have emerged in the modern sense of the term only in about the last 130 years or so, 40 years, 150 years or so. Like, you have to go back to post 1848 revolutions in Europe to see the modern nation state forming, right? And like, I don't want this to be a lecture on nationalism, but it's important to kind of understand where this comes from, because I think it's the American Revolution in the 1770s, then the French Revolution, which follows thereafter 12 years, whatever years later. Then Napoleon is a product of the French Revolution, and Napoleon goes through Europe, lands a body blow to European feudalism. And after all of these things, after Napoleon has left the stage of history and all of those things, Europe is shaken up. The old order is no more. The Holy Roman Empire, the Spanish Empire, and it's like, like a lot of these great centers of power in Europe are shaken up, and in its place emerge like this idea that, okay, let's not build empires and territories around religion and dynasties and kings and shit. Like, let's build it around ethnic identity. Let's build it around religion, not religion in the sense like regional identity, and religion becomes a formation of that, and so on and so forth. So you start seeing by the 1860s, and 70s, you see the German reunification under Prussia. The Prussians fight the Austrians, then they do the Franco-Prussian War, they swallow up all the other Germanic kingdoms and build the German Empire, like the Germany unifies. And then you have the Italian Risorgimento, where like all the Italian different states, for 1,000 years they've been Venice versus Sicily versus Genoa versus blah 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 versus Rome. But now they're like, no, you're not Sicilians, you're not Genoese, you're not Venetians, we are all Italians, so they named this country after the peninsula, the Italian peninsula, and Italian nationalism takes shape. And this is wreaking havoc on multi-ethnic empires like the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which has many different ethnicities within its empire. But now all the ethnicities are saying, like, why are we part of the Austro-Hungarians? We should have our own country. The Ottoman Turks are facing the same thing. The whole Balkan region is kind of falling apart. Like, the Greeks are fighting, the Serbians, the Bosnians, the Croatians. Like, all of these different things are happening, and that is also reverberating across the world, in the colonies of Asia and Africa, where like a lot of these European powers have holdings. So in regions like India, like this idea that pan-Indianism, like we're Indians, like we should have our own nation. So nationalism is very much a result of what social scientists will call modernity and things of that nature. It's a very much post 1850s formation. I say this because I don't think when we think of nationalism, because it's such an everyday political activity and identity, we don't really think about what it has created. And nation states, the world as we see now, the map as we see, the global map, the globe is basically divided into nations. Nations which exist, the United Nations and all of these other things, all of these other regions kind of validate, and nations which like Palestine or whatever, or like many of the other regions which you don't recognize. or like which many governments don't recognize. Like Taiwan is one. Like many countries in the world will not recognize Taiwan because they don't want to upset the Chinese, and so on and so forth. Or regions like Kashmir, which want where a lot of people. Let me phrase this correctly so I don't get an FIR. There have been people, many people within Kashmir who want an independent Kashmir state, want an independent Kashmir country. Now, that will obviously not be acceptable to India, which lays claim to it. Also not acceptable to Pakistan, I would imagine, although Pakistan has a mixed stand on it. Pakistan says that they are okay with the idea of an independent Kashmir, but maybe that wouldn't be so, because like I think the idea is also one of the core formations of the idea of Pakistan is like Kashmir will be a core region of it. That was the idea, like Punjab, Sindh, Baluchistan, the Afghan-Pak border, and Kashmir. Like these are the fundamental core imaginations of what Pakistan project was supposed to be. So you have all of these contradictions within it. One of the fascinating things I find about nations, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit, about the limitations of the idea of a nation and the problems with it, the contradictions within it, before I come to the question of delimitation. One of the fascinating things I find about nations is that now if you look at it in 2025, nation states have been around in the modern sense of the term for 100, 125, maybe 150 years, depends on how you operationalize it. It's enough of a time period. It's not a lot of time, but it's enough of a time period for you to be able to study broad patterns of it, if you will. Nations rarely come together. Like East Germany and West Germany are a rare example of two different nations which merge to form one functional state. And German nation post reunification has actually done well for itself. But that's the exception. Usually that does not happen. Usually nations break. And it's very difficult to bring nations together even when there is a common claim to identity in nation. Like for instance, I'll give you an example. The Arabs are a pan-national identity. Like everywhere, if you go from like Egypt and all of the whole region, Egypt all the way to Iraq, Jordan, and in the Middle East, and all the way to the left, of course, the Arabian Peninsula, all the countries there, Saudi Arabia, and all the Emirate states and everything, and all the way from North Africa coast, from Egypt, all the way to Morocco, and even including countries like Sudan. Many of these countries claim some form of, or like are some form of Arabic identity, the Arabic language, and they ethnically identify as Arabic. So there have actually been attempts to create like a pan-Arabic nation. The idea that if the world is a marketplace of nations, like every nation is there. If we come together, because you're Arab, I'm Arab, like we have our own separate countries, but if we come together, like we will have a much stronger voice and all of those things. And there have been attempts, more than one attempt, to make a United States of Arabs, like a USA. Because USA is basically United States of America. Like ideally, technically speaking, each of the states of USA is like a separate entity, but they come together to make a federation, which is a USA. So the idea was to let's try and merge these countries and make a nation. Egypt was at the center of these experiments. I think they tried to merge with, I don't want to get this wrong off the top of my head. There's a problem with video episodes because I can't like really pause, and I don't have like a crew who can just like fact check me while I'm talking. But like it's just one take. So whatever I'm saying is just straight off the head, off the top of my head. So they can, like, if I say something incorrectly, like, whatever, fact check it. But broadly, it's the same thing. So I think Egypt tried to have this experiment under Nasser, if I'm not mistaken, where they tried to they created briefly this nation which merged Egypt with, I want to say, Jordan and Syria, you know, and I could be wrong. Like, I always get confused in those in that region. Like, they created one country, and there was like this great goodwill because General Nasser is like this great popular figure, and it's a peak of the Pan-Arabic movement, and they try to do it, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work, and it falls apart. And they tried again. I think the next time they tried it with Iraq. Iraq is one of the components. Doesn't work. You can similarly go to South America, Latin America, and that narrow strip, which connects the continent of North America with South America, like this narrow strip called Central America, right? It has all these small countries, Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, El Salvador, Belize, and Panama. And like all of these countries, like they're tiny, 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 tiny little countries. And there was this discussion, a long time ago, where they were like, okay, we are small countries, we're sandwiched between the USA and Mexico to our north, and all these powerful South American countries, but we are these tiny little countries on this small strip of land. Maybe, and we have like a very analogous culture, and we are all basically people, coastal people, we speak similar languages. Let's try and make like a United Republic or whatever of Central America. And again, more than one attempt was made. It never works out. It's very difficult to bring countries together, or you go to South America, you have the Bolivarian project, like the countries of Ecuador or Colombia and Venezuela, right? They were parts of the Spanish Empire, and then Simon Bolivar's revolution happens, and he makes it. And this idea is like, these countries should be like united by some Bolivarian principle and legacy and things of that nature. And it's like one of those pending dreams. I think the last time the Venezuelan, now dead, like that time Venezuelan president Hugo Chavez, he was like talking about reuniting the Bolivarian dream of like merging these countries into one kind of a union. There have been many attempts and discussions as constant, but it's very difficult. In Africa, they're trying to make the East African bloc. They're trying to bring all these multiple countries into one kind of a formation with its own common currency and constitution. There are multiple actually attempts like that in Africa. None of them have actually been successful, and I say all these examples to kind of bring to a point that it's very, very difficult to bring nations together. Nations generally, even if you have a common, ethnic identity, language, culture, religion, history, even then it is becoming very difficult for nations to come together. The default format is nations break apart. So Sudan will break apart with North Sudan, South Sudan. So Sri Lanka will have a civil war, between, the Tamil and the Sinhalese, which has to be, brutally exterminated by the Sri Lankan government, right? Or the British Indian Empire Raj will split into India and Pakistan, and then Pakistan will again split between what was East and West Pakistan, becomes Pakistan and Bangladesh. So nations constantly, split apart in that sense. Yugoslavia, which was like this pan-Slavic nation, built in the Balkans under the leadership of Tito, who was like one of the great world leaders of the time, along like, all of these countries like Nasser from Egypt and Nehru from India and Tito. Like, he was like one of those icons, and like almost within 10-15 years of Tito's death, Yugoslavia, which was one of the great nations of that era, just breaks apart into these 7, 8, 9 countries that depends on who you ask. Like um, the Serbians are a majority. They feel that like they're not represented enough, like majority, but like Serbian khatre mein hai because they're like there's too much minority appeasement going on. We are giving too much away to the Bosnians and the Croatians and so on and so forth. And like all of what was the one country, Yugoslavia, like erupts in the 90s, especially into some of the worst violence and genocidal kind of formations in post-war Europe. So it's very, very difficult for nations to be put together, but it's very easy for nations to break apart. And I have like been very like I read a lot of politics, and I am very interested in these kind of things. Like if you start seeing what causes nations to break apart, right? Usually, like you would imagine, it will be due to religion, or it will be due to some ethnic minority. Yeah, all of those are important reasons, but language is actually one of the most powerful variables of national identity, right? It becomes one of the most powerful reasons why like even if it is an ethnic conflict, even if it is a religious conflict, even if it is a regional, this region, east versus west, north versus south, even if it is that, it becomes situated in and around language. So Sri Lanka, the Sinhalese and the Tamil, the Sri Lankan Civil War. I'm talking about South Asian examples. If you look at the Sri Lankan Civil War, there are ethnic differences between the Sinhalese and the Tamils, but there is language is also a very important part of it. It is Sinhala and Tamil, right? Pakistan falls apart because of the language, the linguistic cultural differences between Punjabi and Bengali. Like the difficulty in getting East Pakistan, which was now Bangladesh, East Pakistan, which is a Bengali speaking region, to accept Urdu as a national language, or for the Punjabi people in like West Pakistan or what you now call Pakistan, is a Punjab dominated state. It's a Jat Punjabi state. In India we tend to think Jat bola to, in our head we think of all of these Sardars, or maybe like these Rajasthan, Western UP types, but Jat, predominantly large number of Jats are actually Muslim. Jats are Muslim, and they like the state of Punjab, 70% of it went to Pakistan. So if you look at the map of Pakistan, there is a state called Punjab in Pakistan, and there is a state called Punjab in India. And if you look at the state of Punjab in Pakistan, all the big Punjabi cities of history, Lahore and Gujranwala and Rawalpindi and all of that, they're there. So actually Punjab went there. We got only Amritsar and like some of the smaller towns, like Sirhind and Ludhiana and Jalandhar. These are cantonment towns. These were never like the heart of Punjabi culture. Like the heart of Punjabi-ness, your Punjabiyat is actually on the other side of the border, where if you go to these cities, if you go to Lahore, if you go to Sialkot, and if you go to all of these different places, they're actually very Punjabi Jat dominated, right? And Punjab occupies like a huge population resource domination within Pakistan. So Sindhis are there, Balochis are there, Pashtus, and all of those are there. The northern areas which Pakistan cannot acknowledge as part of the country, like the Gilgitis and all of those places. But fundamentally, the ruling class, I think it would be safe to say, in Pakistan is Punjabi Jats predominantly, right? So if you see that, and like in Punjab, in Pakistan, this idea that Punjabi and as a nation they created Urdu as like one of their main. So I think somebody was telling me this, like it's a very strange thing in Pakistan. Like um, they are saying now that, oh, Punjabi as a language is dying because like national language is Urdu, but all the politicians who created Urdu and maintain Urdu as a national language are actually Punjabi politicians, right? Who go inside the parliament and speak in Urdu, and as soon as they come out and they are like hanging out over a cup of tea or whatever, they start talking in Punjabi. Language is at the core of the same. It is a core of the big difference between the Punjabis and the Sindhis. It was a major difference between East and West Pakistan. Like that's one of the big problems that the Punjabis had with the Bengali speaking East Pakistan, right? It led to the split of those two countries. Now, if you see the reason for, and I don't want to go too deep into it, the reason for a big divide between East and West Pakistan, language is a major difference, culture, whatever you want to say, it comes down to like language is one of the main components of it. Because very soon after independence, 1947, they tried to make Urdu the national language, and the Bengalis were like, no, we are not having this. And it created like a lot of friction. But ultimately, it boiled down to electoral math. The problem that Pakistan, like East and West Pakistan, when you combine, the problem it had is East Pakistan, which is now Bangladesh, East Pakistan, like had a major population density. West Pakistan was divided into states like Punjab, Sindh, and all of those things. Even if you combined all of them, they were like not or more than the East Pakistan population. So if you just go by popular vote, and if all of East Pakistan votes, uniformly, then the country of Pakistan will have an East Pakistani leader, which over a period of time starts becoming a problem, right? So they try to solve this problem by multiple ways. They said, okay, West Pakistan will be just one unit. It will not be like Sindh. We'll consider it one unit. There is a West Pakistan and there is an East Pakistan. Great, 2-unit theory. You do it, and then the election happens, and there's lots which goes in and out of it. But fundamentally speaking, the final election which happens, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman wins all the seats in East Pakistan. He doesn't even contest in West Pakistan. He just contests all the seats in East and he wins all of them. In West Pakistan, they try to vote together, but like the differences are whatever, but they don't win. So now Sheikh Mujibur Rahman will become the prime minister or president or whatever you want to call it of all of Pakistan. And Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, along with language, also has some interesting issues to say. He's saying, here's what's happening. East Pakistan has great agricultural resources, labor, all of that. You're extracting these resources, especially jute was very big in that part. You're extracting these things, and the benefit of development that comes from that goes to West Pakistan. So between 1947 and 1968, 69, 70, when all of this is coming together, the income rise, like the rise of wages, quality of life, the average income in West Pakistan has grown at a much faster rate than East Pakistan. So East Pakistanis are saying that, look, this is difficult because our resources are getting exploited. We are contributing more to the economy, but we are getting less out of it. Does that sound similar? Do you see where I'm going with this? Are you connecting the dot? If in case you're not, this is exactly what South India is saying about North India. They are saying that, look, we have a problem. South India states are more economically well developed. We are contributing more to the government, central government of India, but because North India is backward, overpopulated, and not able to get its house in order, a lot of what we are contributing is not coming back to us. I think some South Indian chief ministers have made it like a very vocal point. They're like, for every 1 rupee of tax that we pay to the government of India situated out of Delhi, South India, when government of India spends on different region, it allocates money based on, it collects money from across India and then it allocates based on which state needs what. So obviously the states which are doing bad on development parameters will get more spending. So South India is saying that for every 1 rupee we send to Delhi in tax or whatever, Delhi spends on our development only about 30 or 40 paise. So it's basically, the argument that they're making is it is a money from South India which is going to development or whatever in states like UP, Bihar and Rajasthan, okay, which is already a very strong argument. So South is saying if that is the case, and that is the case, then you better give us a bigger say in national politics, because we are funding it. So we should have a better say in how things are spent. Also, we have demonstrated that we can run an efficient state. We can control our population, we can grow the industry, we can grow our economy. We are fiscally responsible. So clearly we are better at this. So allow us a bigger say in national politics. The problem is national politics in India is based on general elections, and in general elections seats are divided on a proportional, not on a proportional representation, is on a general election. So it's based on population density. So North Indian states have more population, so there the number of seats each state gets is much higher. So Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, these states, have a lot of Lok Sabha seats. And the problem is the population is not static. Population continues to keep growing over a period of time. So if the population of Bihar continues to grow, the number of Lok Sabha seats allocated to Bihar will also continue to grow. That is a major problem. That's the problem. And this is where we come to, because the idea is that there should be one member of parliament for every 5 or 6 lakh voters. So if the population of India keeps growing, now it's 140 crores or whatever, you need to have proportionally that many members of parliament. So the Lok Sabha currently has 543 or whatever seats. So as India's population grows, the number of parliamentarians should also grow. Otherwise, one parliamentarian will end up representing more than 5 lakh citizens. Currently, I think one member of parliament, because 543 with our current population, I think one member of parliament represents about 17-18 lakh citizens, which is way too much. For 18-17 lakh citizens, you need maybe 3 members of parliament. So ideally speaking, the Lok Sabha strength should be much higher. So that creates a problem, like, you can't infinitely keep growing that. If today there are 543 members of parliament in Lok Sabha, that is already a very big number. If tomorrow, you start assigning for 5 lakh citizens, there'll be a MP, Lok Sabha might become 1200 MPs, 1500 MPs. It becomes a mela. You can't have discussion. It just becomes a bheed, right? So the other way of doing it is, okay, we don't increase the number of members of parliament, we just change the proportions. So it will be like 540 or 500 or whatever, and whichever state's population rises more, we just allocate them more seats, which means states whose population increases, their numbers of member of parliament increases, and the states who have done a good job of population control, their number of seats decreases. That's also not acceptable. So you're created, like, it's a time bomb which the Indian democracy is sitting on. And they realized this problem, like, to be fair, they realized this problem in the 1970s itself. By 73, when was the last time they increased the number of population, parliament members of parliament, they immediately understood that, oh, this is a problem. We can't keep increasing the numbers of MPs every year, or every 10 years, or every 20 years. But if we don't increase it, then the number of citizens every MP represents will just keep growing, to the point it becomes a farce. Like, one member of parliament for 18 lakh citizens or 20 lakh citizens means nothing. That one person can't manage so many different people ka interests and things like that. So then you've reduced democracy basically to a form of, representation which has no meaning. So they realized this, but there was all of this debate, like, if we just keep increasing the number of seats, like, whichever area has more population, let's give it more seats. If you keep doing that, then states like UP and Bihar and Rajasthan, which did a terrible job of population control, they'll just keep, their number of seats will keep rising. And South India states and some East India states which have done a good job of population control, their seats will keep shrinking. Which means when the national government forms, it will be based off some politician who comes from UP, Bihar or Rajasthan or somewhere like that. But these are states who are getting rewarded with a larger say in the national government because they failed at population control. So it creates another contradiction. So in the 70s, they decided, in very typical Indian fashion, that this is a complicated problem. We will solve it by not solving it. We will solve it by saying, we postpone it. 70s, early 70s, they said, we will take a decision on this in the early 2000s. They pushed the clock back by 30 years. In the early 2000s, Atal Bihari Vajpayee was the prime minister. This came and he was like, this is a big problem. We will solve it 20 years later. 2026 mein dekhenge. So he pushed it, and now 2026 is around the corner. A sensible thing probably to do would be for the government to again say, okay, we'll solve it in 2050, right? But it's actually just postponing the serious conversation of what can be the possible solution, because in the meantime, all that is happening is population continues to grow, but your members of parliament are not growing with it, which means the number of citizens that every member of parliament is representing is increasing. Today it's about 17-18 lakhs. Tomorrow it will be 30 lakhs. Tomorrow it will be 40 lakh, 30 lakh citizens ke liye one member of parliament. At this point, you can safely say democracy is a farce, because it just cannot, like, meaningfully it can't happen. Already it's very tested. If there are 15 lakh citizens, which means, like, the number of towns and cities and villages, like the amount of issues that would be there in the constituency that I'm a member of parliament from, realistically speaking, in 5 years with the time, I can't cover any of that. That's a job that you require maybe 3, 4, 5 people to cover adequately, right? But if tomorrow this number increases from 17 lakh citizens to 30 lakh citizens or 40 lakh citizens, then it's realistically not, like, it's just humanly impossible. Then you can't do it only. So what should be the solution is the main thing. Like, some people have suggested we should, in the 70s they were suggesting maybe we should go for a proportional representation system, that everything can't just be about who got the biggest number of votes. Like in a state like Gujarat, for instance, okay, Congress has not been in power for whatever the last 25-30 years or whatever, right? Now the Congress gets about 35 to 39% vote in Gujarat. So if Gujarat has, you know, I think 125 or whatever, like let's say they have, no, not 125, they have 175. Jo bhi hai, I forget now what the number is actually, but let's say Gujarat has 100 seats in the state assembly. BJP wins 80 of them. So they have a very dominant presence. They are 80 out of 100 seats. But Congress got 35% of the vote. They just didn't win the number of seats. In a proportional representation system, what would happen is, okay, 35% of the people voted for Congress, give them 35% of the seats. So out of 100 seats, Congress gets that many. So in the first past the poll system which we currently have, they might have only 5, 7, 10 seats, but if you go by proportional representation, they have much more. So party like BSP, which may have like 1 or 2 Lok Sabha seats, or like currently they have 0, like they have 0 seats from Uttar Pradesh, but they had 12% vote share, okay, 10, 11, 12% vote share, which means out of 80 Lok Sabha seats that UP has, if you went by proportional representation, BSP would have about 10 MPs. So you're rewarding the party to collect vote share. So basically you're telling every party that it's not enough to get 25% vote share and win the election. You have to get the more number of seats you want, you get to work for more and more. So parties like BJP or whatever cannot just turn around and say we will not engage with Muslims. It's 17%. You're leaving those. You have to work for them. So proportional representation system can make you work in a more. So there are all of these debate formats, like what should be? Should it be proportional representation? Should it be should we keep increasing the numbers of seats in the parliament? Should we cap the number of seats, because you can't have 3,000 MPs in the parliament also. It can't function. So we will limit it at, let's say, 600, and all subsequent population representation, we will do some kind of mini, or maybe you create like a junior MP position, or I don't know what. Like it's honestly something which is very difficult to respond to, but add to that an additional layer of language politics. It's not just that the states which are in the north have a bigger population and they are, therefore, in line to get more seats. They're also speaking Hindi, okay? And the South Indian states are constantly saying that this is Hindi imposition, which is a very, very kind of big problem. Language comes in. All the things that I was saying in the early part of the podcast, language becomes a big issue. Sorry for the audio only audience, like I was lighting a cigarette. But like language becomes a big issue now. So you can't solve language as a problem in this. Because the whole point of South Indian politics, like a lot of the Telugu, Tamil, especially the Tamil, but also Malayalam, Kerala speaker, not Kerala speaker, Kerala region, like, a lot of the Malayalam speakers, they're very committed to their culture and their language, and they sort of have a history of rejecting Hindi as a base for nationalism. Like Bengalis are also very passionate about their language, as Pakistan discovered. So far, Bengalis in India have not yet had this issue with Hindi. They haven't really taken the uniformity, the imposition. They haven't really felt that Hindi is being imposed on them the way Tamils have felt. But Bengalis in what was then East Pakistan felt that way about Urdu, right? So although Bengalis in India have not really made language an issue so far, we have a history of Bengalis on the other side of the border. I know there are much more differences, but remember, there were also much more similarities. Like the idea of Pakistan was based on common religion, right? But that fell apart due to language. So Bengalis have not yet shown so much. of an issue. Like you look at Gujaratis don't have a problem because the Prime Minister is a Gujarati, although he interestingly has stopped speaking in Gujarati. He speaks in Hindi, except maybe for Gujarat elections. But it's very clear that Gujaratis don't see it as an assault on their language, that there's a Hindi imposition. Like nobody in Gujarat is going around saying our great Gujarati leaders, Amit Shah and Prime Minister Modi, why are they speaking in Hindi? Like nobody, not even the opposition, nobody is raising this issue, right? They're also not seeing Hindi as a problem. Gujaratis are not doing that, to my knowledge. You go to Maharashtra, it's becomes like it's there, but like there is Marathi pride. Like I lived in Maharashtra for 9 years, and I understand and speak a little bit of Marathi, but there is Marathi pride. They definitely in parts of Maharashtra want you to speak Marathi or know Marathi, but it's not taken the form of anti-Hindi. Like if you speak to Hindi to them, they'll take it like Gujarat and Bengal, but like they're not really taking it as an imposition कि हिंदी में ही बोलना पड़ेगा. Odias are not doing it, Assamese are not doing it, but in South India they are doing it. Kannada, Telugu, like Telugu's not so much, but Kannada's, Tamil, people in Kerala, they definitely start taking it a little bit. It's not that you don't speak their language, don't bring Hindi into it. They see Hindi as an imposition. So there is an added element to this existing political problem of how do you proportion out seats of the Lok Sabha in a country where population is like exploding as we speak. It creates a problem of North versus South, where the South is economically contributing to the development of the North and wants to have a bigger say in the national politics, but it has a money, not the population, and the representation proportion is decided by population, not money. So I think it was in the meeting that just happened which I was mentioning. I think the BRS people from Telangana, they made this proposal. They said give states the number of seats by their contribution to the economy. So South India contributes about 30-35% of the national economy. So give us 33-35% of the seats in the Lok Sabha. Radical proposal. Because now what's happening is people, like, this is not a casual thing. Major political parties and politicians are beginning to articulate these problems, and they're beginning to question the very model upon which power is distributed. It's not in danger. India is very safe. India is like the Indian democracy is there. But when countries fall apart, you often don't see it till it's very late. Like Yugoslavia falling apart, the Soviet Union falling apart. Like I know somebody will be like, oh, Soviet Union is a very different thing. Yeah, I know. Even Pakistan breaking apart. Like when it happens very quickly. Towards the end, it gains momentum very quickly. It's almost like dhada dhad, kya ho gaya? But the point of no return is actually much earlier. The point where you could have done something. Like India's own partition under the British is actually a very great example. Like after 1945-46, there's actually not much you can do. Like, and many people tried, they tried to mediate, and no, that's too late. If you wanted to prevent the partition, you have to go back before 1939 elections. That's probably the last time you could have. That's the point of no return. After that, it will take time to play out. Like 1939 Congress election, you know, it's in a very strong position. Muslim League is in a very weak position. Uh, you can't imagine that in less than 10 years time the country will break apart, like it'll partition. But that's what happens. The point of no return is much earlier, and I feel in India of today we are coming scarily close to that point of no return. It will come and go and we will miss it, and then down the road we will look at it and be like, oh shit, what have we got ourselves into? Because it is a scary moment when political parties from a region are articulating their grievance in these terms, and these patterns we have seen before in history. They are very correctly saying, okay, we are contributing more money, our language is different, it's a regional political negotiation between who has power and who hasn't, and you're not listening to us, so you better listen to us. And the response from north is actually very interesting also. North Indian politicians are not coming out and saying, okay, you know what, south has a point, in the spirit of federalism, let's incorporate them. Like Mamata Banerjee skipped this meeting because if you do delimitation today, Bengal is one of those states along with like Bihar, Maharashtra, Rajasthan, which will gain a lot of seats. So Bengal, so she's like, or like the Bengali politicians are like, you know what? I'm not going to argue for getting less seats in the center, because if Bengal gets more seat in the national elections, it proportionately increases my bargaining power. Similarly, all these India bloc opposition parties, based in Bihar and UP, Samajwadi Party, Rashtriya Janta, RJD and all, they are not going to say anything about this. They are not taking a principled stand and by saying, you know what, the South Indian political parties, they have a point. We are part of one country. We need to think about it. Our states, we have done a bad job of fiscal prudence and population control. The South has done a good job. Let's try and work out. They're not doing that. So North Indian politicians are like sitting this one out. South Indian politicians are coming together. Telugus, Tamil, Kannadigas, Kerala. People are coming together and they're like trying to form a unified front to the central government. It should be scary. I know it doesn't feel scary, it is not scary, but these are the points in time that you look back. Like 15 years later, we will look back at this point in time and say, oh, this was happening. Why didn't we say anything at that time? So North Indian political response has been one of, let's not engage with this, right? And the Janta response, the common response has been not nice. There's a lot of North Indian Hindi chauvinism. Believe it or not, there are a lot of people going around saying, okay, why can't I speak Hindi? They're like taking on Tamils. Like I see a lot of these posts on social media about like, I'm in Bangalore, I spoke in Hindi and like I got discriminated against, etc. Guys, you're throwing fuel to the fire. Do not do that. People in this part, if you are interested in keeping India together, you have to kind of understand that many countries, forget India, many countries around the world have like fallen apart for less than this. Like language, ethnicity, this idea, once this idea starts becoming a political reality, once this idea is like, oh, the North is dominating us, we are doing so much but we are getting very little in return, they don't appreciate us, they don't like our language, they're trying to put their way of life on our way of life. The moment this starts taking root, it's game over as far as nationalism is concerned, because the whole point of nationalism begins from our kind of people live in our place and our way of life. The moment you start saying that my way of Tamil life or my way of Telugu life is not appreciated by this idea of India, or I'm not getting enough out of it. Like, yeah, they appreciate it, but I'm not getting enough out of it. Like, I don't feel respected enough as a Kannadiga. I don't feel respected enough as a Keralite within India. The moment that starts taking a root, that's a problem, and we are becoming, and that is happening at a time this conversation is evolving around political delimitation, number of seats, economic contribution, and all. This is scary, is what I'm saying, and this is what we should be scared of. uh, but yeah, that's my gist on this. It's dangerous, it's personally terrifying to me that we live in South Asia, where Pakistan split on this. Sri Lanka has had a major civil war. Nepal has all these tensions between the Pahadi and the Madhesi groups. You have all of these different tensions between the region. Within Pakistan, there is Sindhi versus Balochi versus Punjabi. Within the northeast of our country, there are all these tribal tensions. Manipur is still burning. You have all of these different, like Sri Lanka, the civil war may be over, but the Sinhala Tamil, the divide is still existing. Within all of these things, how lightly the national media or the academicians or the thinkers or the intellectuals are taking this whole problem of delimitation, north, south, and language divide. These may appear like three, four different issues, but they are like different dimensions of the same fracture which is happening. Cracks are appearing in this idea of India, and unless we find a bold and urgent solution to this, it's going to get rough. Hey, you finished the whole episode. Well done. I can't believe you can tolerate my voice for so long. But in case you liked what you heard, you might consider also joining for the exclusive episode that I do for my paying subscribers, because that show gets into slightly edgier topics and I don't really want to put it out in the public domain. It's available on the Patreon as well as on YouTube through the join option. And in case you don't want to drop extra money, I completely understand. Please keep listening to my regular show. I'm grateful as ever. There's a buy me a coffee link in case you want to drop some love. Otherwise, just have a nice day. Stay being awesome. Bye bye.